Welcome to Common Sense Wellness with Dr. Gary Martin, the show that helps you take control of your health with clarity, confidence, and practical wisdom. Dr. Gary Martin has spent decades in clinical practice and natural wellness research, discovering that the key to lifelong vitality lies in understanding the body's signals before they become symptoms. Each week, we will explore simple science-backed methods like mineral testing, facial scans, and lifestyle adjustments that help you restore balance from the inside out. You'll also hear from expert guests and real clients who have turned their health challenges into stories of transformation. No gimmicks, no fads, just common sense wellness that works. Now, here's your host, Dr. Gary Martin.
Welcome to Common Sense Wellness, another episode. I'm Dr. Gary Martin, and for 50 years, I've helped people understand their health through testing, self-testing, practical wellness strategies, and holistic approaches. And on this show, we explore simple, actionable ways to restore balance and boost energy and thrive. And today, I'm honored to be joined by Dr. Sandra Kaufmann, a global leader in longevity medicine whose background spans cell biology, anesthesiology, and clinical medicine, with training at the University of Maryland and a residency and fellowship at Johns Hopkins. Wow. She is the author and creator of the Kaufmann Protocol, a groundbreaking framework for understanding and slowing cellular aging, and the Kaufmann Rating System, which helps people evaluate evidence-based longevity supplements. Her books, The Kaufmann Protocol and Why We Age and How to Stop It in the Aging Solutions, have made her one of the most trusted voices in the science of aging worldwide. Welcome, Dr. Kaufmann.
Thank you. It is fantastic to be here.
So, you've had a remarkable academic path, cell biology, anesthesiology, Johns Hopkins, and yet you've built your career around longevity medicine. Can you walk us through that journey and how those different disciplines connect for you?
Yeah, sure. So I started out as I just wanted to be a scientist, didn't really know what kind of scientist. I went to college and the tropical jungles just seemed like so much fun. So I was going to be a cell biologist of plants. And I was getting a PhD in that at University of Connecticut. And then my dad sort of indicated, who's a physician, that plants don't pay bills. And so maybe I needed to get a real job.
Yeah.
So I left there with a master's in cell biology and plant physiology and went to med school. And I have what I consider a liberal arts degree in medicine. It says I did a year of general surgery. I did a year of neurosurgery. I did anesthesia, and then I stayed and did a fellowship in peds in anesthesia at Hopkins. And the cool thing about each of these is that it teaches you something different, right? General surgery, you learn a lot about anatomy. Neurosurgery, of course, is all the workings of the brain and neurologic disease and brain trauma and all that kind of stuff. And then when you get to anesthesia, it's all about, how molecules interact with all of the different pathways in the body. And then peds teaches you sort of dosing and, a few other sort of intricacies. So if you tie all of these things together, you go, I have a really strange background.
Yeah. So at what point did you shift from treating patients in conventional medicine to asking the deeper question of why we age in the first place and what we can actually do about it?
So I'm getting old. So about 12, 13 years ago, I was hit 44, 45, and I just decided that aging was silly, completely unnecessary. And I thought, you know what, I can figure this out. And, everyone looked at me like I was Don Quixote chasing windmills, but I decided to use my cellular background and dissect why cells aged. There was no anti-aging medicine. There was no longevity medicine. There was just scientists in dark corners trying to hunt down cellular deficiencies at the time. And so I just sort of kept reading and reading and reading all of these very basic biological papers and decided that your cells aged in very specific categories and subcategories, and then decided to sort of rate how different agents would affect those categories. And then it sort of became a longevity algorithm.
So the The Kaufmann protocols that build on the idea that cellular aging can be categorized and addressed systematically. For someone hearing that concept for the first time, how would you explain what that means in plain English?
So in plain English, if you think about your body, it is essentially cells and cell products, and that's it. And everyone goes, "What about the soul?" I'm like, "Yeah, that is really not my forte." But so, because as a previous surgeon, like you're just tissues, your cells and your tissues. So if you looked at a cell, we know that cells age for very, very specific reasons. And if you can slow down those reasons, you can slow down aging. Right? Like if your
Right.
cell is a factory and we all, we've all been in factories, assembly lines sort of break over time or information gets destroyed or your employees sort of don't do exactly what they're supposed to be doing. The widgets that you are producing don't really come out as well. And that's exactly what cells do. Like they just don't work as well over time. And you have to sort of, nudge and prod them to do the right thing.
So who are the people that you typically work with, and what are they usually struggling with when they first come to you?
Good question. Usually it's people over 40, but not entirely. And it's usually people who sort of understand longevity a little bit, but not enough to sort of figure out what they really should be doing. I mean,
Okay.
and of course, everyone's on a spectrum. Sometimes I get these people that are on like 1,000 supplements and 1,000 peptides, and they're like, because they just, they went with the kitchen sink mentality. But the true patient is usually someone over 40 who walks in with basic complaints, low energy, my vision is failing, I don't sleep well, and I'm starting to hurt everywhere. And that is stereotypical aging. And the answer is all of that can, in fact, go away.
Right. So you developed the Kaufmann Rating System to evaluate longevity supplements based on the evidence. What does a rigorous evidence-based approach to supplementation look like, and how does it differ from the way that most people currently approach it?
Well, most people approach it. If I ask any one individual, like, why did you decide to take this? You know what they say? It's my grandmother's uncle's grandmother's son told me to do it. And you go, oh, well, of course, which is just like the dumbest reason ever because someone told you to, right? It should be
Right.
evidence-based. So I have my 7 tenets of aging, and this is cellular aging. Like it's 7 categories with some subcategories. And just to quickly list the categories so people have some idea of what I'm talking about. Like categories 1 is things that go wrong in your DNA. 2 is things that go wrong in your mitochondria. 3 is pathways. 4 is repair mechanisms, so on and so forth. There's 7 of them, right?
Okay.
So I said to myself, well, let's look at agent X, whatever it is. What is the evidence that can positively affect any of these categories? Right?
Right.
So if there was some positive effect in a cell culture or a test tube or just a really good theory, it gets a 1. All right. If there
All
was
right.
evidence in a rodent model or basically any non-human mammal model, it would get a 2. And if there's evidence in humans, it would get a 3. And if it did nothing at
Right.
all, of course, it got a 0. So 0 to 3 per category. So now you look at numbers and it looks like 2.3.1.0, and there's 7 of them. So you could sort of barcode things now. So you would say to yourself is, okay, well, I'm going to like pick a supplement. Which ones to pick? So if you are worried about your mitochondria, you would look at my happy little list and pick things that have a high number in the mitochondria category, right? Or if you're diabetic or you like to eat junk food, pick something in the waste management category because that's where glucose falls. So this is designed to scientifically explain what they do, rate it, and then help people choose supplements for themselves.
Okay. So one of the one of the main things that we focus on here, the sponsor of Common Sense Wellness Biological Immunity Research Institute, BIRI for short. One of the things that we focus on here is testing, mainly self-testing, really understanding what's happening in the body before making decisions, especially on supplements. So in your work, how central is objective data and measurement to the protocols that you recommend? It sounds like it's pretty central.
It depends, because some things that I wish we could test for, we really can't.
Which
Um,
is
so for example, in my pathways category, there are 7 sirtuins, and sirtuins are histone deacetylase enzymes that act as on-off switches in your cell. And the important ones for aging are sirtuin 1, 3, and 6. So in cell models and in rodents, you can test these things. In humans, you can't. I mean, I guess someone can, but you can't do it at home, and Quest doesn't do it, and most physicians don't know what sirtuins are. So I would love to test your sirtuins. I just can't do it. So there's a whole range of things to be like, oh, this would be great. So you have to sort of use baseline labs to get relative data, and then the rest of it you have to hypothesize from someone's story, right?
okay, right. All right. So one of our main tools is biological immunity analysis, which is A for short, which is just a basic urine and saliva test that I found out about back in the 70s. And it turned my life upside down because it's so easy for people to do. It's actually a soil analysis that's applied to the human body using urine and saliva rather than soil. So it's really basic, but it covers what I consider to be the number one health problem in America and the number two health problem in America. The number one health problem in America, as I see it, is subclinical dehydration. The number two health problem, as I see it, is chronic inflammation. It's pretty hard to have chronic inflammation and be fully hydrated. So it's kind of like, in a way, you can think of it as dominoes. So anyway, the BIA being a non-invasive test that gives a real-time look at what's happening at the cellular level. As someone who thinks deeply about cellular aging, what excites you about that kind of functional testing as part of a longevity strategy?
So I completely and entirely agree with your inflammatory marker. I mean, that's huge. In fact, that is in what I call tenet 5. It's your immune system that becomes your inflammatory system over time. And I think you're right. Most diseases of aging are massively involved in inflammatory issues. So we do check a lot of, your HSCRP, your interleukins. I do check IL-1, IL-6. There's a lot of things, but I completely agree with that. What's really interesting is I was sort of going through my head your thoughts on hydration. And I think one of the big problems as you get older with hydration is not necessarily the simple basic drink water, you'll be better, but the fact that you're hyaluronic acid deficient. Because fibroblasts and other type cells that are supposed to make hyaluronic acid don't. And hyaluronic acid is what I think of as a molecular sponge. So like one medium-sized molecular weight molecule of hyaluronic acid will cling to roughly 6,000 molecules of water. So if
Wow.
you are older and you don't have as much of a molecular sponge, you can drink until the cows come home and you're just going to pee it out like a racehorse. So to actually maintain the fluid balance, I think that you need these osmotically active molecules to do it. So I'm a huge pusher of hyaluronic acid,
Right.
orally as well as topically, but orally is key. And then, there's a few other things that I think I think there's lots of things that are important, but those are 2 very key issues.
Right. Yeah. Great. Have you encountered moments where the data from testing completely changed the direction of what you would have otherwise recommended? What does that teach us about relying on assumptions versus measurement? We have a saying that, you can't manage what you don't measure. It's what I try to burn into people's brains. You can't manage what you don't measure.
I don't completely agree, because as a physician, I was always trained that the history from the patient was probably even more important than a lab. So when you listen to the story, what are people doing? What bothers them, right? Do their joints hurt when they do X or Y? How is their presbyopia? What have you noticed about your hair change? What did your parents have? What did their grandparents have? So I do through the extensive history, you can sort things out. Now, but what I do, it's not really a test per se, but it's sort of like just a quiz that I give people. Because inevitably they come in with like all of this mishmash of complaints. And then we sort of fix those complaints. And then 3 months later, I'll be like, well, how's your back pain? And they deny it. Hi, I never had back pain. Like, no, I think
Yeah.
you did because it's written right here, right? Or I go, you didn't bring your glasses today. Can you see the forms? And they're like, I don't need glasses. Like, well, you did 3 months ago, right? So it's not labs per se that always tell the story. It's the real story.
Yeah. All right. So one principle that I come back to often is make truth your authority. Do not make authority your truth. Given the amount of conflicting information in the longevity space, what does that idea mean to you?
Ooh, I love that statement. That is, I should put that on my epitaph. I live and breathe by facts. Like
Okay.
it's funny, everyone always asks me, well, who do I listen to? And the answer is I listen to no one. If I have a question, I go to the very rock bottom of cellular biology research papers and I read the details. And if one paper says it, that's one thing, right? But if 17 papers sort of reiterate the same concept, then we're getting somewhere, right? And you can so I start all of my understanding of longevity from the absolute base and then build up, right? So for example, I became recently obsessed with iron toxicity. And I'm
Okay.
like, well, is it real or is it not? So I went back to the very basics. What does an ion look like? How does it move electrons around? How does it interfere with the Fenton, pathway? And how do all of these? So then I went from there to the molecular processing of iron, to how do you store it in organs, to blah, 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 coming to the absolute definitive conclusion that as you get older, your bloodstream may say you're iron deficient, but we store it in our brains and in our hearts and our livers, and the oxidative stress is truly overwhelming. So I came to the definitive conclusion that we are iron toxic after the age of 40, unless you're a woman and you menstruate, because that's the only way to get rid of iron.
Speaking of iron, we do a lot of hair mineral analysis for mineral evaluation, and we see low iron. Now, of course, hair is tissue, so we're talking about tissue, but it's just a consistent thing to see low iron. Now, either the lab normals are totally out of whack, or there's something going on. Now, most of the people that we test are probably 60 and up, because that's somewhere in the 50s. We spend half our life living a life where we're just, using our body up, we're tearing our body down, and then, the body's still there. We spend the next 50 years trying to put ourselves back together. That's my little personal philosophy. So right about 50, 60 or whatever is when they start to develop some kind of symptom noticeable from something or other, and they start paying attention to themselves. So I just am wondering if you have any thoughts on why we would be consistently seeing low iron in the hair or tissues.
My guess would be that hair follicles are not a storage organ. They're
Okay.
more of a receiver of what's in the vasculature.
Right.
And there's no doubt that iron in the vasculature can go down over time, but there's a reason for it. And this is going to sound a little long-winded and far-fetched, but hear me out. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So we're going to take a side trip back to the Middle Ages and the plague. Okay.
Okay.
And the bug, Yersinia pestis, loves iron. Can only survive in a high iron environment. Okay. And we know that 60% of Europeans and anyone where there was the plague died. Right? So 40% lived. So the question is, what is the difference between the people that died and the people that lived? Right? The theory goes that if you lived, you probably had the capacity of lowering your iron, getting it out of your vasculature and putting it in your tissues while the bacteria was in your bloodstream, right? And what is really interesting, if you look at people today, if you have high inflammatory markers, you hide your iron in organs, right? So
Hmm.
if you follow the theory here, if you came from someplace where your heritage survived the plague, you probably carry the genetics to hide your iron. You add to that the inflammatory process that gets higher as you get older, and you have two reasons to be hiding iron in storage tissues, right? And if you do MRIs of the brain, the liver, the kidneys, and the muscle over time, you will find that iron sits there and it's
Hmm.
toxic, right? But they're storage depots for the iron. So
Right.
taking a hair follicle may or may not represent adequately what's actually in your body.
Right. So if someone listening today feels overwhelmed by all the talk about supplements and protocols and aging science, what is one practical grounded step they could take this week to start moving in the right direction based on your years of experience?
So it's a good question. So I think that depends on who they are and what they're already doing. I believe that you have to do stuff every day, every week, and every month, and so on and so forth, right? For true longevity. And so every day, it's diet and exercise to start, right?
Right.
So if someone's
Right.
eating a bag of Doritos, maybe that's a bad idea, right?
Right.
If someone
Right.
is a couch potato, maybe that's not a good idea either. So the
Right.
best, easiest thing people can do is just move, right? Just
Right.
move around, right? So diet and exercise are crucial. On top of that, I think supplements and pharmaceuticals are extremely helpful. Are they necessary? No, but I think they really help. By the time you are 40, you're NAD deficient, just by statistical analysis, and there's no really good way to test it at all. So taking some sort of an NAD precursor really is helpful. That's one of the lowest hanging fruits out there.
Right.
Knock off some free radicals, right? If you take a free radical scavenger that is lipid soluble, for example, squalene or astaxanthin, they travel around in your LDLs and HDLs and they lower cardiovascular risk. So that's kind of cool. And then you put in every week, here's a really easy one. I recommend body massages.
Hmm.
Lowers
Okay.
lowers stress, increases blood flow to muscle and skin, and it makes you feel better. So that's kind of nice. And then less frequently, there's a lot of complex things. We go into biologics and plasmapheresis, and that's sort of like the upper, accelerated.
Right. Okay. Great. So where can our audience go to learn more about your work and your books?
Ooh, good question. So I actually have two websites. One is for the science of it, and it's just the Kaufmann Protocol.
Okay.
And then for people who want to like see me as a provider, it's Kaufmann Longevity.
Com.
.com. They're both .com. And my books are on Amazon. So there's two Kaufmann Protocol books. And I decided to start a treatise series. I decided it takes so long to write these books because if anyone ever looks at them, they are just laden with a bazillion citations. I am like so scientifically geeky. I mean, they're kind of funny books, but they're very accurate. They're spot on. It just takes me forever to do. So I thought
Right.
I would release information in sort of smaller aliquots to make it easier. So the first one I put out a month or so ago is called Mastering the Mast Cell. And it's just an ebook and it's on Amazon for like $1 or something ridiculous. I was just trying to get information out, but everything's on
Right.
Amazon.
Good. And if you can leave our audience with one takeaway about taking control of how they age, what would it be?
I think the most important thing is mindset. I think people need to know that aging is not mandatory and you can live an incredibly fantastic health span reasonably easily.
Right. Well, thank you very much. Very interesting. You're a walking encyclopedia of scientific knowledge. I can see why you're into the whole evidence-based thing. Thank you very much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us on Common Sense Wellness. Remember, taking practical steps to understanding your health emotionally and physically is how we restore balance, boost energy, and thrive. See you next episode.
Thanks for listening to Common Sense Wellness with Dr. Gary Martin. To learn more about the testing and resources we discussed, or to find out how you can take charge of your own health, visit BIRI.org. You'll find valuable information, free tools, and ways to connect directly with our wellness community. That's BIRI.org. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and share the show with someone who's ready to take their next step toward better health.